The state regime media, which inexplicably continues to call itself Fox News, is currently engaged in a spectacular live-on-air collapse. This isn't merely a network's failure to defend its preferred political figure. It is a deliberate campaign of contempt aimed directly at their core audience. Their effort to save Donald Trump from his ongoing death spiral has forced them into a position of profound, undeniable hypocrisy, rooted in a fundamental disrespect for the economic reality faced by everyday Americans. Let us commence this analysis with the most egregious and intellectually insulting proposition presented by the Trump apparatus: the notion that affordability is overrated. This is the core thesis of their financial disinformation, and we must address it first. We have witnessed Larry Kudlow, a voice amplified by the same collapsing media infrastructure, state precisely and without equivocation, "I think affordability is just like such an overrated issue. It's like so overrated."
There are issues on some of these prices, although I think affordability is greatly overrated.
This statement, ladies and gentlemen, is not merely poor analysis. It is a declaration of economic aristocracy. It emanates from individuals who have demonstrably never been forced to live check to check, whose livelihoods are not determined by the price of gasoline or the cost of a carton of eggs. The sheer audacity required to tell millions of working Americans, many of whom are their own viewers, that their principal daily struggle is overrated is breathtaking. It is the sound of an economic elite dismissing the lived experience of the populace they claim to represent. And the hypocrisy is immediate and staggering. In the very next breath, the network is forced to acknowledge reality, albeit through a distorted lens, by discussing the rising unemployment rate. The host on Fox Business had to concede that the unemployment rate climbing to 4.44% was bad. The question we must pose is one of basic logic. If the economy is fundamentally robust and the nation is in a so-called golden age, why is unemployment spiking, and why would the struggle for basic necessities or affordability be overrated? The two premises are mutually exclusive. Their confusion is not genuine. It is a strategic necessity because they cannot reconcile the failures of the administration with the manufactured narrative of success. Furthermore, when we delve into the numbers, and this is where legal and analytical precision is crucial, we find the deception extends into basic accounting. The methodology of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, which relies on Census Bureau population estimates to inflate survey sample sizes, is being manipulated. The analysis provided even by some of the most critical economists suggests that the actual growth in the labor force is significantly lower than the reported figure, perhaps by half. This means the actual employment growth is near zero, and the true unemployment picture is far grimmer than the 4.44% reported number. When a government's math is suspect, how can the populace place any faith in its governance? This is not just a statistical discrepancy, it is a fundamental breach of trust. Who is truly trying to shove lies down our throats about the economy? The evidence is clear. The Trump economic team is in disarray. They are contradicting themselves from one segment to the next because they are not operating from a position of fact or coherent policy, but from a position of sheer, desperate damage control. They are literally unsure of how to position Donald Trump's crash, so they oscillate wildly between dismissing the pain of the American people and then belatedly acknowledging the pain with corrupted data. This back and forth isn't indecision. It's a failure of narrative engineering. The public, living paycheck to paycheck, is the ultimate arbiter, and their bank accounts are telling a very different story than the spreadsheets being presented on cable news. The contempt is palpable, and it is the necessary fuel for the next wave of untruths they attempt to disseminate. The first lie, the dismissal of affordability, is designed to numb the public to current suffering. The second, and perhaps more insidious lie, is designed to distract them with the promise of a future utopia, the ever-receding horizon of the golden age. This is the classic tactic of the con artist. Your wealth is right around the corner, just wait. Enter Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who attempts to pivot the economic failure onto a straw man, the Schumer shutdown. His claim is that the shutdown made things worse and that the fourth quarter GDP would suffer a definite hit because of it. Let us address this with the cold logic of authority. At the time this argument was being made, the Trump administration controlled the entirety of the executive branch. The Republican Party controlled both chambers of the legislature. Donald Trump was, by all accounts, ruling as an authoritarian figure, bending the government to his will. The entire apparatus of accountability rested squarely on the shoulders of the Republicans. Yet, Besant expects the American people to believe that the economy collapsed because of a Schumer shutdown. This narrative is transparently false. No one buys what they are selling, and no one called it the Schumer shutdown. The responsibility for the economy rests where the power resides, and that was, undeniably, with the Trump administration and its congressional acolytes. Following Besant, the economic messaging spirals into pure fantasy. We are told, particularly by economic advisor Kevin Hassett and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, that factory jobs are picking up and that the second half of next year will bring a wave of manufacturing and construction jobs that will blow you away and lead to an incredible 6% GDP growth.
The construction jobs alone, you can't invest $3 trillion a year without driving our GDP off the charts. You're going to see 4s, you're going to see 5s, and you're going to see 6% GDP growth under this president because the factory's coming home, the tariffs are bringing them home. You have never seen construction the way you're going to see it. And then when these factories come online, wow, are you going to see numbers nobody's ever thought possible.
This is the quintessential scammer's promise. We must demand specificity. Where are these factories? Have they broken ground? The data presented in the same segment already showed construction, manufacturing, and transportation jobs were bad, yet they promise 4s, 5s, and 6% GDP growth, numbers that defy all rational economic forecasts for a developed, stable economy like the United States. Furthermore, Lutnick's claim includes a deeply insulting subtext. He states that we need to train these people for these great-paying jobs, implying that the current American workforce is somehow unfit or incapable of immediately filling these roles. The question, which is echoed in the public sentiment, is this: are they creating these imagined jobs for immigrants because they deem the current American labor pool insufficiently talented for these make-believe jobs? This narrative not only promises a future that is economically impossible, but also subtly insults the skills and dedication of the existing American worker. The contradiction in their messaging is stunning and demands a legal perspective on fraud. Besant claimed the GDP would collapse due to the shutdown, yet Lutnick promises a miraculous 6% GDP growth the following year. They are lying not just to the public, but to each other, demonstrating a complete absence of a unified, responsible economic plan. Their entire strategy is a desperate, endless echo of, just wait, it's coming. The American people have been waiting, and all they have received is rising debt and the escalating cost of basic needs. This leads us directly to the third wave of deception, involving a manufactured crisis and a performative act of victory. The third major deception centers on the absurdity of the Trump administration's trade policy and the ultimate lack of accountability for governmental failures. Howard Lutnick attempts to frame the removal of tariffs on goods like coffee, bananas, and generic drugs as a major policy shift focused on affordability. He expects applause for this move, claiming they are now focused on the small things that touch the American pocketbook. This is a profound act of gaslighting. The fundamental issue is that these tariffs were imposed by the Trump administration in the first place, often for purely political and punitive reasons, as demonstrated by the case of Brazil. Brazil, which had a trade surplus with the U.S. and a good trading relationship, was hit with punitive tariffs after their former president, Jair Bolsonaro, a MAGA puppet, was prosecuted. The tariffs were not based on sound economic reasoning. They were a political act of retribution. Now, after these tariffs have demonstrably increased prices for the American consumer, the administration removes them and expects a victory parade. They created the problem, the higher prices, and now they are taking credit for merely undoing the damage they caused. This begs the question posed by many concerned citizens. Does the Trump team genuinely consider all Americans to be stupid idiots? Their actions are an insult to the public's intelligence, demonstrating that their entire policy is not one of strategic growth, but one of chaotic, self-serving political leverage. This approach has ruined businesses and lives, demonstrating a profound lack of empathy or understanding of real-world consequences. The failure to take responsibility extends beyond trade policy and into the bedrock of ethical governance. Besant, in his most alarming moment, suggested that a key to lower oil prices might be if something happens down in Venezuela. A chilling, barely concealed wink and a nod toward potential military intervention or resource seizure. This is the language of an administration willing to gamble with geopolitical stability and potentially incite conflict, all to artificially depress a single commodity price for political gain. It suggests an administration willing to pursue a policy of resource monopolization cloaked in the guise of economic relief, further confirming the authoritarian undercurrents of the entire operation. The true accountability gap is laid bare when we consider the actions of Senator Rick Scott, the man who was thrust forward to defend the administration's health and financial decisions. Scott, who is infamous for his involvement in one of the largest Medicare and Medicaid fraud criminal cases in history, a man who invoked the Fifth Amendment dozens of times to avoid self-incrimination, is the very individual arguing against the repeal of a provision that would grant Republican senators at least $500,000 each in taxpayer-funded damages.
Walk us through what we're talking about here, because here's the headline on the Journal. Outraged House lawmakers vote to strike $500,000 payouts for senators. They say that the House voted Wednesday night to repeal this Senate-crafted provision that could grant GOP senators at least $500,000 each in taxpayer-funded damages. How do we know it's $500,000?
Well, I mean, first off, the provision was put in there. Unfortunately, most of us didn't know that it was in there, and most of us are, like I don't need to make money off of government at all. What's frustrating to me is what we should have is, how do we do something to hold Jack Smith accountable, Judge Boasberg accountable, the people that made these decisions? If Christopher Wray was involved and Merrick Garland, how are they going to get held accountable? That's what I'm after.
Scott's immediate response was not to condemn the provision, but to deflect, saying he didn't need the money, and instantly shifting focus to, how do we do something to hold Jack Smith accountable? The man who built his fortune on defrauding government health care programs is now using his position to secure more taxpayer money while attempting to cripple the Department of Justice officials who are investigating his political ally. The public is right to be outraged. This is not about the money. It is about the blatant use of power to shield oneself and one's allies from the legal process, all while robbing the American people blind. The fundamental question is, why aren't they held accountable for it? The final segment of the Fox News collapse is not merely political. It is a collapse of personal dignity and a descent into the truly bizarre, demonstrating that the entire administration has abandoned all pretense of normalcy. First, the network brought on Tom Cotton to discuss the military buildup in the Caribbean, where he attempted to justify the destruction of vessels by saying, effectively, that we know they were drug traffickers, not fishermen or refugees, because CNN International would have already been on the ground and interviewed all their families.
We've done a great job of destroying these drug traffickers' boats, which is stopping deadly poison from coming into our country. Secretary Rubio said that all of these strikes are supported by multiple sources of intelligence. That's correct. You can also use your common sense. If any of these had been boats full of fishermen or refugees, CNN International would have already been on the ground and interviewed all their families and told their stories. So I think we can be confident that all of these strikes have been against cartel-based drug traffickers who are destined for the United States.
This is an almost incomprehensible statement. It replaces the legal requirement for due process and verification with a chilling, callous assumption. The lack of a CNN report is proof of guilt. It implies that families of victims, if they exist, are either too afraid to speak or do not matter. This is the moral calculus of an administration that views human life and international law through the narrow, transactional lens of political expediency. Finally, we arrive at the grotesque, undeniable proof of the total breakdown of propriety, the revelations concerning Donald Trump's physical conduct in the Oval Office. Reports from the New York Post's sister company confirmed that Donald Trump has a habit of spraying perfume or cologne on foreign leaders and cabinet members and then sniffing them, a physical act of dominance and violation. This is not a political statement. It is a psychological breakdown on a global stage. The host from the Fox network was forced to concede. No, let me tell you, that happens all the time, not just with the Syrian president, but I've seen it with other foreign leaders. I've seen it with members of our cabinet, myself. This behavior is objectively bizarre, as the public correctly asks, what is the president, a dog? And more importantly, I would feel 100% violated if sprayed by anything without giving permission. Isn't that actually assault? This is the final layer of the Trump collapse, a complete abandonment of personal boundaries, respect, and presidential decorum. It is a spectacle of dementia and egomania on parade, a testament to an administration where the bizarre has become the mundane. The entire broadcast, from Kudlow's dismissal of affordability to Lutnick's impossible GDP forecasts, and from Scott's self-enrichment to Trump's sniffing ritual, is a continuous, long-form example of scammers attempting to sell a broken product to an increasingly skeptical populace. They are looking at the second half of next year because they need time to train people for jobs that don't exist and to distract from the reality that the economy is, by all reasonable metrics, in the toilet. Their policies, particularly the self-serving tariffs, have pushed prices sky high, forcing American families to eat less meat and improvise on basic needs. The true crime here, the fundamental legal and moral breach, is the contempt they hold for the American people. They believe the audience is stupid enough to believe the lies, the promises of wealth right around the corner, and the manufactured controversies used to shield the powerful. The Republican Party has demonstrated time and again that they can rob the American people blind. Yet accountability remains elusive. We must conclude with a demand for rationality and justice. The evidence is overwhelming. This is not a strong, successful administration. It is a failing, desperate operation run by individuals who have no idea what they are doing and who will lie with impunity to maintain power. Do these people truly realize that nobody believes them? The final question is not for them, but for us. How long will we tolerate the lies, the corruption, and the sheer incompetence? If you are tired of this campaign of contempt, if you believe that accountability should apply to everyone, regardless of their wealth or position, then I urge you to subscribe now. We must continue to analyze, dissect, and expose this collapse because the truth, unlike their promises, is the only currency that matters.